It's not a big figure. It's not in the dividend.
Thank you.
Okay, the next amendment there is one on fully imputed for tax purposes. The point here is that if indeed my example of 300,000 was to be borrowed from this council for HBRIC to channel back as dividend, then that part of the dividend couldn't be imputed for tax purposes, and that's correct. So that's a little bit of process, really. And on page 40, there was discussion on the inclusion of council's acquisition and divestment policy. The suggestion here is to have a web link, and I think that's a good one because it's a fairly long policy. So if the readers of the statement of intent want to understand what the acquisition and divestment policy is, they can go a web link to council's acquisition and investment policy and read as much or as little as they choose to do. So, Mr. Chairman, that's it. I think there was only one point we needed to, from memory, that we needed to come back to, and that's at the top of page 32, that which is the 5% borrowing versus the 1% that council resolved on the 25th of March.
So we were going to come back to that. I think, Councillor Barker, did you have a question around that? No? Any other questions? And Councillor Graham, you had all yours answered?
Yeah, I've got comment left, no questions.
At the end, okay. Councillor Hewitt?
On the bullet point that you've raised here on the top of page 32, Paul, and just clarifying reducing its holdings in equity investments. So are we referring to the port here? And I know it says in the long-term plan we have to consult, but which one trumps? Yeah,
the next, Councillor, the next paragraph underneath that one at the top of page 32, the next paragraph clearly states that must comply with the local government provisions requiring a special consultative process, and with council's policy in that regard as well for the disposal of any strategic asset. The Napier Port is a strategic asset, so they could not, and they don't intend to sell down the port as far as reducing equity investments. They don't have the power to do that.
On that
Councillor
same,
Belford.
I'm sorry, on that same point, the cover memo notes that basically is enabling about $10 million, I think, to be raised. Can you remind me what was that to be for? Was there any indication of what that was for? What the 10 million? What the plan was for the 10 million?
I've had no discussions with them on what that 10 million would be. I can only assume. Well, I mean, I have had no discussions now.
That particular point has been in the statement of intent ever since the company was created. So I guess it's as it states there, it's a vehicle for raising funds for investment, but there's been no specific discussion with them on what that may be.
Chair, I do have a question, sorry. Mr. Jury, just as a follow-up question to Councillor Hewitt's. So in 2015-16 year, when their balance sheet, their net shareholder funds is 250 million, can they, if they were to raise 10 million, would they raise it on their balance sheet and effectively uses the port as security without selling any of the shares of the port?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that would be, I believe, the discussion they'd be having with the bankers. I mean, they can't get a guarantee from council, and that's not indicated that they would be expecting that, because they will have delegated approval from council to raise that money, so they'll hardly come back to council and ask for a guarantee. So it'll be raised on its assets. And it's the view of the bank on the strength of those assets, which is predominantly their two investments, Napier Port and Ruataniwha. It'll come back to the view of the bank.
Thank you.
Further questions? Happy to move, councillor Scott. We have a seconder, councillor Hewitt. Thank you. Councillor Scott, wish to speak?
Mr Chairman, we had a fairly good debate about this earlier, and it's good to see that the company has picked up the points that we have included, that we requested. I think the others are tidying up from the actual position as it is now. And I look forward to discussing what ethical investment means. Maybe something could be drawn up and included in the workshop that we have with HBRIC coming up to tidy that one up. And obviously has been a lot of concern out there with governments investing in casinos or not investing in casinos, and we do want to see right up there that we are seeing that the money actually works for the good of Hawke's Bay. Thank you.
Seconder, you wish to speak?
This has been through a rather robust process with a series of toing and froing, so I'd just like to acknowledge the work that's been put in by all parties, and pleased that it's moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor
Chair, it has not gone through a robust process. I just want to, before I get into that though, I see the 6% as an aspiration, and I've spoken to that about that before. I actually am happy that the 6% is the aspiration, but I'm encouraged that you think somehow you're going to get some sort of guarantee from the directors of HBRIC to return 6% over a given period of time, which is still undefined. So I'm a bit encouraged by that. I would like to know about the time. We've never talked about HBRIC being able to raise $10 million and off a balance sheet that is now changed, miraculously changed from NTA to market value. I've never seen any market value of the port, and it's very significant that their only real tangible asset is the port. And we're about to give them, a subsidiary of ours, permission to raise, and that's an increase from 1% to 5%, which will come to, based on those valuations, $10 million secured against our port. And you might get a very friendly banker who says, oh, sorry, you can't pay it back. You don't have to sell shares in your port. But that doesn't usually happen. Hasn't happened in Spain and Portugal, and it won't happen here. So I will not support this paper given the changes that are in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Barker.
I was to move an amendment. And I seek to amend 4.
You can only amend the resolution.
Well, I was to amend the resolution to say that endorse it, subject to the amendment to amending the statement of intent in 4 bullet point 9, which the 9th bullet point, and for the sake of clarity, is the one that says raises funds for investment by issuing bonds, etc., by altering the value 5% to 1%. It's at the top of page 32. And I do so because that's...
Tell us why you do so when we have a seconder. Councillor Belford seconds that. Now you can tell us why you do so.
Well,
the two are inconsistent, and he pointed out to us in his report to us today, which I thank him for, because he's quite correct, it is inconsistent. And I think the two should be consistent. So if the council believes that the amount that HBRIC should be free to raise by previous resolution is that by right to the lesser of 1% of the value of the balance
Sorry,
sheet.
can you turn your microphone up?
Oh, sorry.
Just no.
Approves HBRIC be able to borrow up to a lesser value of 1% of its balance sheet. That was the council resolved that at a previous meeting. And Mr Drury has pointed out to us correctly that this is inconsistent with what the statement of intent is. And I think that the council's decision should take precedence over that. And I think the statement of intent should be amended to reflect what this council has agreed of 1%. Now, $10 million is a lot of money which will be ultimately the liability of this council because it's raising it against the balance sheet of a company which is wholly owned by this council. And the definition of investment, as it's stated here, is very wide. I know people who go to the races and invest money. Now, that's what they think as an investment, but I think the definition of investment, and I would not want to see a group of people, even though I have trust and confidence in them, making decisions about $10 million worth of this council's money, for which I am ultimately responsible, as all of us councils are, without reference back to this council. We have looked at our long-term plan and we've nickeled and dimed almost every element of it. When we made a small adjustment of some $100,000, it's had an effect on rates. We understand how this is going to have an effect. So my concern is, having looked at it carefully, I feel that if I'm going to give, delegate to the directors of HBRIC and a value to raise money, then I think the council's decision previously, where it was at 1%, was fair enough. That's still quite a good deal of leeway. But if it gets the value of $10 million, I think it has to come back to this council. $10 million of ratepayers' money is what's in effect here. It's not anybody else's money. You can talk about it being on the balance sheet. You can talk about it being attached to here, bankers being satisfied with it. But if it all goes to custard, it's $10 million worth of ratepayers' money, and I think we should have a say on that. So that's my resolution.
Thank you. Seconder. Mr. Speaker. Nothing to add to that. Any other speakers?
I would support that, but I'd want it to, the 1% to be on the net tangible assets, not some sort of market valuation.
Other speakers? Councillor Dick.
Mr Chairman, I'll speak against the amendment. I believe that the council's interests are adequately protected, and note that in 10 there's the requirement to insert the council's long-term plan policy on acquisition and divestment, so that's well protected. And to be honest, if the council is to give HBRIC some discretion to use its commercial skills for the benefit of the region and the council, then it needs to have available to it a sum of money that is realistic in terms of investing in activities of suitable scale. And to be honest, 1%, you're only going to give them 1%, you might as well give them nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
I'll support the proposed amendment to the resolution simply because I can't think of a rationale for the change from 1 to 5%. $10 million is a lot of money, and I don't see why a fully owned subsidiary of this council should have the opportunity to make a decision without reference to us about $10 million. If they need to raise some funds, I can't imagine any reason why they'd need more than $2 million, which 1% will enable them to do.
I'd just like to take an opportunity to speak here. I think we're getting confused here on the 1% and the 5%. The 1% in the previous resolution was not about investments. It was about sustaining a cash flow if required for HBRIC to go beyond end of June. This has been here right through as a part of this statement of intent. at 5%. It has got nothing to do, actually, with the previous resolution, which was around a specific requirement to ensure, as prudent owners of the company, ultimate owners of the company, that they were in a position to not go into a deficit following the end of June. So I think we need to clear that confusion up right from the start. This has been here right through, and I'm happy to vote against the amendment. Other speakers? I think we've just about exhausted ourselves, haven't we? Apologies, Councillor Barker. Right, a reply.
Right, reply. I do think that there is an overlap here, and I do recall the discussion we had at this 1% value, and it wasn't about the operating costs of this. What the issue was that HBRIC was proposing to go ahead and invest more into the dam on geotechnical and other basic work for the dam, so the dam could proceed more quickly. And the concern I raised and other councillors raised, that if that investment was made without the conditions precedent being met, then we faced the real problem that should the conditions precedent not be met, that extra investment in helping to facilitate the speedier start of the dam could be sunk costs, stranded costs as I saw them at the time, and we would not be able to get back out of them, that we'd have that invested prior to the conditions precedent being met. And I was very clear in my mind that there would be no further investment by this council in the dam beyond a certain point until the conditions precedent had been met. Now, that was what this was about, was further investment in this dam, not about necessarily operating costs, about geotechnical and other work to be undertaken. Now, the way this resolution, and to protect us from that, we put a cap, the council put a cap at 1%. Now, if we go and reaffirm the 5%, then I think it is very open for the directors of HBRIC to say, well, we can raise $10 million here as an investment. Now, the Ruataniwha Dam is an investment, and therefore we could go and undertake a further investment in the Ruataniwha Dam up to, say, $10 million worth prior to the conditions precedent being met. That's my principal worry and driver about that. It's very clear what this is, and if that's what the directors decide to do, and we later challenge them on that, they would quite rightly point out to us and say, well, you had a statement of intent, you had a discussion about the ability to borrow $10 million, you knew it was for investments, this is investment, you can have no criticism about it, you went in knowledgeable and with your eyes wide open. While I'm saying that I understand that's where that's at, and as far as I'm concerned, raising $10 million to invest further into the Ruataniwha Dam at any stage to make it go faster is something I'm not happy with. So I'm proposing it be consistent, 1% for both documents.
Thank you for summing that up. I'll put that motion in. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And against. The amendment is, what's the correct term? Is defeated, yes, lost. Division, okay, all those in favour, hands please for division. And against. Got that, thank you. So we go back to the original motion. I don't think there's many that haven't spoken, except perhaps Councillor Pipe. Anyone else wish to speak to the original motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's something missing out of there, or something that we're overlooking, and that is the recommendation from the chairman of HBRIC in relation to ethical investing, that the council adopt a policy on ethical investment, which provides such a definition, and then reinstate the word in the statement of intent. So are we just going to forget about that, or are we going to note it as an action item? I don't think it should be overlooked.
Well,
Unusual, I'll let you answer that.
Sorry, oh yeah, sorry. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think it's something that should be debated separately, and then aligned or otherwise with the statement of intent, however council decides to go with that. I suggest that it be discussed at the Corporate and Strategic Committee meeting next month.
So it becomes an action item
Yes.
for that committee. I must say that would be a really intriguing and interesting debate.
It will be.
Mr. Chairman, could I suggest an alternative course? I agree with it being an action item, but I would have thought that could have been an item for the Audit and Risk Committee to come back with a recommendation on, given that that's the expertise we have collected together for those very issues.
We're getting out of shape again, but
Sorry. Could
as
I
long
just-
as it's debated, is
Could I just respond to that? And it's only Councillor Barker, because there's an issue of timing. The Audit and Risk Committee agenda's gone out today because of Queen's birthday holiday, so it would have to be a late item or held over to the next meeting.
As a non-member of that subcommittee, I would like to take part in that discussion.
You wish to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been through a robust process. We actually discussed this very statement of intent at our last meeting in great detail, and as I said before, I am pleased to see that our concerns were met and some amendments that were came back to us from HBRIC. It certainly has been, it is important if we have an investment company, to give them the ability to invest. It's not up to council to make those decisions for them, or we will ourselves be deemed directors of that company. And I think we all too often seem to be moving into that space. So we have a timetable to meet with this. Had we not reached agreement on this today, then quite frankly we would have been in a position of actually referring it back to HBRIC and calling a special meeting in order then to adopt it within the time frame. So I'm glad to see that we are progressing with this, and I do look forward to some discussion with HBRIC as to what does constitute ethical investment, because we can end up, again, as I suggested earlier, with circular words that leave us questioning what dubious might mean. So I look forward to a robust debate around establishing some principles on ethical investment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Another division. All those in favour, raise your hands, please. And against. You good with that? Let's break for 10 minutes. We'll resume with the HBRIC update. I see Dr. Pearce is here. Good morning, welcome. We'll see you shortly. 10 minutes, please.